Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about how generational trauma can affect the Black community when it comes to mental health issues. So, a couple of months ago, I spoke at a conference, a national mental health conference, and I spoke a little bit about the mental health trauma in the Black community and the stigma in the Black community when it comes to mental health issues and how I feel it affects us still to this day. So I'm thinking about making this a series. I spoke about this for about an hour and 10 minutes, so I don't want to make this video completely long. So I'm thinking about breaking it down into portions so I can tell you a little bit more about how I feel mental health issues in the Black community are a little bit different when it comes to other races. And when I spoke about this at the mental health conference in front of doctors, psychiatrists, counselors, a lot of mental health professionals, a lot of them were really receptive about it. So I thought I could also educate the public a little bit more about this issue so we can be aware of it and learn how we can move forward to fix this issue. So, pretty much, I want to talk about how slavery has affected the Black community when it comes to mental health issues and how that generational trauma still is a factor to this day. So first I want you to think about how the slaves must have felt when the slave masters came and got them from their own land and took them away from everything they ever knew. They took them away from their houses, their beautiful, their beautiful land, everything that they ever knew, and they took them on the slave ship to a new land, and they had no idea where they were going. So I want you to think about how that can affect the mental health of someone, knowing that you're going away from your home and you have no idea where you're going. And of course, someone is taking you by force. Would that not affect your mental health knowing that? And I also pretty much want you to think about when they put the slaves on the slave ships. So when the slaves got on the ships, they were branded, they were chained, and they were put underneath a boat. When they were underneath this boat, it was very horrible conditions. It was very tight, it was cramped, it was really, really hot, and a lot of the slaves died from either suffocation or they died from infectious diseases because pretty much they were laying in their own filth. No one cleaned up after them. They were pretty much just chained and laying down next to each other, and they were all just laying in their own filth. So if you didn't die from suffocation, you died from infectious diseases. Now, I want you to think about the slaves who made it to the new land, but they were underneath that boat and they saw all these traumatic experiences happening. Of course, they went through their own trauma underneath the boat, but just think about how they saw their friends, their family members, people they known their whole lives just die underneath that boat because of the horrible living conditions. So I want you to think about how traumatic that could have been to the slaves to know that you've lost people you really love dearly, people you've known your whole life. And I also want you to think about what happened when the slaves got to the new land. So when they got there, they were sold, and many of them went to plantation houses. Now I want you to imagine this. A big, beautiful plantation house. It's a whole lot of land, and this is where the slave master lived. But this is not where the actual slave lived. They lived in the back of the plantation house in a little shack. And in this shack, there was no furniture. They were sleeping on the floor pretty much. And it was just like very horrible living conditions and not very accustomed to what they were used to when they were in their homeland. So think about how traumatic that could be for someone, seeing someone who owns you by force living in this big, beautiful house, big, beautiful plantation, and you're living in the back, pretty much. So think about how that affected the mental health of the slaves. And I also want you to think about the things that they fed the slaves during that time period. So imagine if a slave owner was having a big dinner that night, and they were having like this roast and all these like vegetables and stuff. That's not what the slaves got to eat. They pretty much got to eat the slop of whatever was left in the meat. Like, think about if they were having a pork chop that night or something like that, and you would get the intestines of the pig. You wouldn't get the good part of the pig. They were eating the intestines. And think about how, like, a lot of black people still eat chitterlings to this day. Like I'm saying, a lot of things that happened during slavery are still like a part of what happens in our culture today. So think about what they fed us, diet wise. And of course, think about how the slaves were treated during that time. They were beat, they were raped, they were killed. All of these things were going on. And do you think that was not affecting the mental health of, our ancestors during that time? Of course it did. I want you to think about something. During that time, a black woman slave who was raped and impregnated by her slave master, they had a law passed during that time that made it okay for that to happen. So think about what was going on in the minds of black women slaves, knowing they could be raped by their slave master, impregnated by their slave master, and of course, it was okay because a law was passed during that time that made it okay. And a lot of the black women slaves who were impregnated by their slave masters were also beaten during that time. And it was like a very, like, when I read about it, it's traumatic. They usually would tie you to a post and whip you when they wanted to beat you. But when a pregnant slave, like, got, bigger as the months went on in her pregnancy, she couldn't really fit around the post anymore. So they would dig a hole in the earth, put her belly in the earth, and just lash her on the back. And just think about how traumatic that was, because women are really hormonal during that time when they are pregnant. So think about what she was thinking about, what her baby was going through, because what you are going through that during that time, your baby can feel that too. So just think about how traumatic that was. Or when a slave decided they didn't want to take this anymore and they tried to run away, they were either brought back and beaten severely or they were killed. So think about that. Think about the hard labor, all these things that they were doing for free, and they had no say in it or they would be beaten. I also want you to think about how they pinned us against each other during that time when it comes to colorism that, it still affects our community to this day. The darker skinned slaves were in the fields and they were made to work in the hot sun all day. And the lighter skinned slaves, they were made to be in the house and do all the housework and stuff like that. So, of course, all of them were still slaves, but the slave masters treated the lighter skinned slaves just a little bit better than they treated the darker skinned slaves. And now we have this complex in the slaves' minds, the lighter skinned slaves thinking, well, I might be a little bit better than my darker skinned brothers and sisters because the slave master finds me more better than they are. And of course, there were the darker skinned slaves who felt like they had this animosity towards the lighter skinned slaves because they were, in fact, treated a little bit better. And think about how we are pinned against each other in today's society when it comes to light skin and dark skin. You will see a lot of lighter skinned people in music videos, movies, television shows. They are more accepted in society than darker skinned black people. So think about how darker skinned black people are treated about their skin color, their features. Like I've seen a lot of darker skinned women be treated like dogs because of their complexion, their features, the way that some black men talk about them. And of course, you also have it the other way around where there's darker skinned black people who have animosity towards lighter skinned black people and they treat them a little bit differently. So we're still treating each other differently when things were happening, generations and generations ago. It still plays a big part in today's society. So a lot of things that went on back then, they still affect us to this day. So I really want you to sit and think about that. Like, generational trauma is real. Mental health issues in the black community are real. And I want to leave you with this. When a black slave showed signs of mental health issues back during slavery, the slave master would just beat them. So we were literally beaten into silence about mental health issues back then. And think about it today. A lot of people in the Black community are afraid to talk about mental health issues. It's hushed. It's an embarrassment to a lot of Black people and Black families. So a lot of things that went on during slavery still plays a part to this day. So I definitely want to make this a series. I want to come back next time and talk about generational trauma during the segregation era and how that affects us till this day still as well. So I want you to follow the Safe Place app. That is a mental health app for the Black community that I have created. It's free on Android and iPhone. And I just want you to download it and see the resources and the information in the app and how it could help the Black community be more receptive to talking about their mental health issues and just being able to have a free mind about it. Because we do go through mental health issues just like anyone else, and we should be able to be educated about this and to go get help about this. It's serious, it's a problem, and this is why I want to do this series. So stay tuned. Also follow the Safe Place app. It's on Android and iPhone, like I said. You can also follow our page. I will tag it in the description. And just stay tuned and learn more about how generational trauma has affected us and how we can move forward and start to heal. Thanks for watching. See you next time.